Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. The ARC of California is thrilled to offer Caring Futures, a proven resource program dedicated to supporting caregivers and family members of adults with disabilities. Understanding the unique challenges faced by family caregivers as they age, Caring Futures offers critical planning assistance, resources, and a supportive community. Caring Conversations is just one part of Caring Futures program here at the ARC of California. We will share more about our other offerings by Caring Futures at the end of today's conversation, so please stay tuned. As you can see, we have ASL interpretation this morning for our discussion. You can turn on closed captioning by clicking the button in the bar below. At the end of today's conversation, there will be a question and answer session. At that time, we'll invite you to raise your hand or type your question in the Q&A to ask our guests directly. If you need ASL interpretation to ask your question, please request video access through the chat feature. Hello, everyone. In case you haven't met me before in previous Caring Conversations, my name is Felisa Strickland. I am a sole parent caregiver for my daughter, Lily. Lily is 24 years old. She has a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, autism, epilepsy, and IDD, and she requires full-time care. We enjoy our challenging and fun life in Santa Barbara, California. Alongside full-time caregiver, I am a strong advocate for individuals with disabilities and their families. I serve as a board member for the ARC of California, as well as Alpha Resource Center of Santa Barbara. I also participate on many committees and enjoy getting involved in fundraisers and advocacy projects in our community. As a parent, Caring Futures instructor, and parent educator, I am thrilled to be here for this important conversation with you and our special guest. Today's topic is caring through the transition, parenting, disability, and mental health. We are joined by Amanda Griffith-Atkins for today's conversation. Amanda is a licensed marriage family therapist and founder of Amanda Atkins Counseling Group in Chicago, and author of How to Handle More Than You Can Handle, Caring for Yourself while Raising a Disabled Child. She is an in-demand speaker and author of the topic of caregiver mental health. She lives in Chicago with her husband and 3 sons, one of whom has a rare genetic syndrome. Amanda is passionate about helping parents of disabled children find support and their community. As a therapist, she has spent her career focusing on grief, perinatal issues, and working with couples. Through her new book, she has found a way to give parents an invaluable set of tools to find strength, acceptance, and self-compassion to face these difficult emotions, to become a more forgiving and healthier version of themselves and better caretakers for their children. Without further ado, please welcome Amanda. Good morning, Amanda.
Hi,
Thank you
how are
for being here.
you?
I
It's
am
so
good.
good to be here. I'm so excited about this.
Yes, me too. Um, I've been reading your book, so I'm super excited to sort of delve into that with you this morning. But before we get into that, um, let's talk a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about your personal insight as to what prompted you to write the book and just a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so like you said, I live in Chicago with 3 of my sons, my husband. My sons are 16, 13, and 8. So there's a lot of boy energy in this house. And my oldest son, Asher, was born with a rare genetic syndrome called Prader-Willi syndrome. And it occurs in about 1 in 20,000. And when I was younger, right after I gave birth to Asher, I felt like there were a lot of resources for specific diagnoses, and kind of like the how-to of parenting, how to advocate in an IEP meeting, how to, um, you know, navigate the school system, things like that. I felt like there were lots of resources, but I realized very quickly that there weren't resources for the emotional experience that parents go through. And as a therapist, I felt like this was something that maybe I could kind of fill that need a little bit. And so I started my Instagram a few, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And very quickly, I realized that I wasn't the only person that felt this way. I wasn't the only person that felt like there was lacking information on how are we supposed to navigate the emotional experience, the high highs, the low lows of this, very long journey that we're on. And so when I wrote my book, it came from the perspective of a therapist, but also from a parent that had lived this experience. And I'm so excited about this opportunity in particular because Asher's 16 now. He's not quite an adult, but I can see it right on the horizon. And there's a whole chapter in my book about parenting a disabled adult child and how unique that is, and how, so frequently people feel kind of forgotten, and suddenly all the supports that we've been relying on for so long come to an end. And so this particular population is really important to me because I think sometimes it can be a bit of a forgotten population. So the book was written simply because a book like it had not been written yet. So I did it.
Well, thank you. We're so happy that you did. Like I said, I've been reading through it, and I can see myself and so many of my friends and fellow parents and caregivers in the book. And it's a very refreshing read. So thank you for doing that. I'm
Mhm.
so moved by it. So in the introduction to, I was so moved by the introduction in your book, and you write about the importance of acknowledging our feelings, which you just mentioned, and what we are experiencing as parents, and how that affects our disability parenting journey. Especially important in the early years of the diagnosis, but it's equally important as we approach adulthood and beyond. So, could you talk a little bit about maybe like what are some of the things that you're feeling now as you're approaching that? And then also, what is the message you want to share with parents that are maybe already in the throes of that or approaching it as well or have been living it for a while? What would your therapist thoughts beyond that?
Yeah, I'm going to start on the topic of grief. And I think the interesting thing about our grief as parents is that it evolves, right? Like you're not going to feel grief about like when your child is 2, your grief is going to look very different from the grief that you feel when your child is 22, 25, 40, right? Because we start to see other people's lives look a lot different from ours. My memories of when Asher was little that I talk about in the book and I talk about a lot is signing on to social media, seeing other kids take their first steps, seeing other kids, babble their first words. These are things with Asher that came much, much later. And for some people, that we know, maybe their children never are nonverbal, or maybe they don't walk. So, some of these milestones that we've seen other children reach, our children may never reach. So now take, a 30-year-old child, all your friends' children are getting married. Maybe they're having grandchildren. Their kids are finishing graduate school and launching their careers. So the grief is there. It just looks different. It's a different experience that we're grieving on. And so I think it's important to acknowledge this feeling because for so many of us, we've been told the message that if we feel grief about this, it means XYZ. It means you don't love your child. It means you don't embrace disabilities. It means, you wish your child was different. And so I think subtly we're sent the message that if we feel grief and if we talk about our disappointment, that means something bad about our child or about ourselves. And so I want to be the voice that's letting parents know, hey, it's totally normal that you feel grief. When you had a child X many years ago, you probably thought someday this child would launch, perhaps start a family, maybe have children, have a career, um, you know, become independent, right? Because that's what we think, that's what our typical experience of parenthood is that it moves towards independence. But for many of us, that independence looks very different. And so I think it's important to be talking about this because it frees us up. It frees us up from self-judgment, and it just helps us have more self-compassion to just say, that we just had the first day of school this week, and I sent Asher off and he had a little backpack that he got at Target with spaceships on it. And I can tell you most juniors in high school aren't having, a little backpack with a matching lunchbox. And but he did it, and I noticed a little bit of feeling of like, oh man, like that's so different from the other kids. But I just noticed it. I named it to myself, and really as soon as it came, it went, because I didn't have to get stuck in that cycle of saying, oh, okay, I'm such a bad mom. I need to just get over this. Like, I need to just celebrate who he is. Like, I love him. I wouldn't change anything. Cut all that stuff out. I don't need that. It's okay for me to just say, oh, having a little bit of a grief moment. Let me feel it, sit in it for a second, move on, go on about my day. So I think the more open we are with these feelings to ourselves, the more we can just acknowledge when we're in it, and then we can move through it.
Absolutely. Yes, I feel that so much. And I love the way that you describe that. There's a lot of pressure on us as parents to, the other thing I like that you mentioned, there's a lot of pressure on us not to feel that grief, right? Or not to openly express it. Or, like people, it's one thing in our own community of parents that are also caregiving parents or disability parents, they might get it a little more so than others. But even in that community, we don't want to talk about the hard stuff or the things. But what that does is, in my opinion, that keeps us from accessing the things we need to support ourselves, right? So in acknowledging our feelings, we can actually then turn that into a movement to actually access the things we need to support ourselves, so that we can better support our kids, right? So thank you. That to me, I'm on the same page with you on that for sure. Um, another thing I loved about the book was throughout the book, you're constantly encouraging reflection and asking yourself questions to gain a better understanding. And what really resonated with me there is that's sort of how our curriculum is written for our classes when we're doing our future planning, is it's taking time to actually think about what are the things that you're going through, what do you need to do to address them. So talk a little bit about what are some of the questions that you think families and caregivers of young adults approaching adult transition should ask themselves to help them facilitate the wants and needs of the future planning experience.
Yeah, I love this question. I think, we all come into these experiences, into parenting, with different sets of values. And, some of us really highly value independence. Whatever means possible, we want independence. Some people might more value, like, safety might be their number one value. These values are shaped by our children's diagnoses, by their level of functioning, their level of need. And so I would encourage parents to really ask themselves, like, what are my values as a parent, as a human? What are my child's values? If your child's able to express values and you have some sense of like what that is. Um, and I think when you can answer those questions, and I encourage people to, you can literally Google list of values on Google, and they'll all pop up. You'll see a million of them. And I have this exercise as one of the reflection exercises in my book. But I think it's good for parents, and if you're partnered too, to sit down with your partner, and or even if it's just a co-parent, sit down with somebody else that's making decisions about your child, and come up with your shared set of values, so that every time you're faced with a decision, you can say, okay, how do our values impact this decision? It gives you like a little bit of a blueprint. Sometimes these decisions, when I'm thinking about things like, should I put my child in a residential home or should I not? Right? This is a huge decision that is such a personal decision based on, what are your finances like? What is your child's needs? What are your needs? Do you travel? Do you, like, what do you have other children in the house? There's so many things that go into this. And so I think if you can allow yourself to, instead of just having to like, how do I make this decision? You can stop for a second and be like, let me reflect on my values. What's important here? What feels most important here to make a decision that reflects what I believe and what I think is right? And that immediately protects you from being like, well, what is everyone else going to think about us? What are other people doing? You're able to say what's best for me and my family and my child first and foremost, right? And so I think looking at it from a values perspective can be really helpful. That's like one very quick question you can always ask yourself right there. How does this decision impact my values? How do my values impact this decision?
And then what about including your child in that process? Like, do you have any suggestions or thoughts on that? And especially, I know a lot of times in our classes, some parents really struggle with, say, for example, their child is non-speaking, maybe just uses gestures to communicate, things like that. What I think that's a real challenge for parents because while they want to do what they think their child wants to do, they don't necessarily know for sure. So would you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that this is something that feels so hard because we want to do right by our kids. And I think so many of us are in a position over our child's lifespan of making these really, really intense decisions. And not, this is like, I just want to pause and acknowledge, like, what a responsibility we have, right? Like, what a sacred calling it is to be in a position of making a decision for another human being that we love so much. And we're not able to fully get their perspective on it. It's very difficult and very gut-wrenching to me to be in that position. But I think what you can do in that situation is, you know, reflect again on your values, make a decision, and then it comes down to being flexible, right? Like giving yourself permission to be flexible, giving yourself permission to have made a mistake and telling yourself like I'm going to read my child's cues. I'm going to communicate to other people that are involved in this decision and I'm going to truly give myself permission to back out if I need to. Or I know it's not always that easy, but that we can always acknowledge making a mistake. It's all sort of a giant experiment at the end of the day, isn't it? Like, it's none of us, I want to say none of us know what we're doing. I don't know if that's fully true. I feel, I'll speak for myself. Most of the time, I don't fully know what I'm doing or what I'm getting myself into, but I will be the first to say, this isn't working. I've made a mistake. We need to pivot and reroute. And the irony in all of this is I don't know everyone here exactly what you're bringing in, but I'm constantly working with my son with flexibility. We have to be flexible. We have to be flexible. And I often have to remind myself of that same motto. Like, I have to be flexible too. Sometimes I'm not going to hit a home run on the first time. And so I just simply have to kind of check myself, admit I've made a mistake, and go back to the drawing board, So we don't know what we don't know, and we have to be flexible.
Oh my gosh, so important. And that flexibility kind of lets you get out of that paralysis of doing nothing, right? Like, so, because a lot of times when you don't know what to do, sometimes you don't do anything. But if you do have, like you said, a reflection of what your values are, what you want to do, what you need to do, what is the goal at hand. And then if you just remember that it's okay to make a mistake. And I know as a parent, it's really important to me to see say, for example, it's the living situation, right? Like it's really important to me to see what that looks like before something happens to me, because if we don't try something, then I don't know. And I don't want to leave it up to, you know, chance, right? Like what's going to happen. So taking some steps and being flexible seems like a better choice than not doing anything. But sometimes the way you're feeling can cause you to just sort of sit still and sit in that, unknowing and not being able to make changes and take steps. So
Yeah.
really important. I love that word, flexibility. Um, so there are so many things I want to ask, but one thing I want to ask for sure is as a therapist and a parent of a child with a disability, you know the importance of having a community. Or a person that you can talk to about things, about what you're going through, what kind of challenges you're facing. What would you say to parents or caregivers that struggle to make connections, maybe isolate themselves? Not necessarily by, what feels like choice, but maybe they're exhausted, they're overwhelmed, or they simply don't know where to start.
Yeah, first of all, just completely normalizing this. I think at different points, probably in all of our journeys, we've felt that tendency to isolate. Like there's just times where you're going through something and it really feels like nobody will understand. Nobody can say anything that's going to help me. I really am in this alone. And so I think, first of all, it's okay to start small. Like maybe you join, social media's hit or miss, right? Like, but I have truly seen some really amazing relationships, even if they're just online relationships, come from whether it's Instagram or Facebook or whatever. Sometimes I'll watch comments come in on my Instagram and someone will say something and then a stranger will respond and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm going through the same thing. I'm going to DM you." And I'm just like, "Oh, that makes it all worth it to be like, wow, those two strangers like found themselves and now they're DMing about this." And yeah, they're probably not going to become best friends or go on vacation together, but for that little moment, they found solidarity and connection. And I just want people to know that, like, let's not underestimate the power of that connection. Like, we're not saying that, yeah, you have to find your best friend kind of situation, but a little bit of validation and understanding goes a long way. So maybe it is an online relationship. Maybe you do, put yourself out there a little bit and DM someone, or, you get in a Facebook group and try to connect to some people. You share your struggles and see what comes up. I think one thing that feels particularly hard about this is the vulnerability piece. If we want to connect with people, we have to be vulnerable. We do have to put ourselves out there. And that can feel really scary when you're feeling so isolated. But, you know, I would encourage people to be brave and, whether it's sending a message to somebody or texting an old friend, don't be afraid to reach out and say like, "Hey, I'm really struggling today. Could we grab coffee this week?" Or, we want people to come to us, but I think especially as parents of disabled children, sometimes people don't always know how to enter into our world in a way that feels comforting. And so I would just say don't be afraid to take the first step. And it can feel really discouraging. I'm sure there's people in this webinar even that are like, "I feel like I always take the first step. I feel like nobody ever reaches back out." But there's this quote by Maya Angelou, and she says, "We teach people how to treat us." It's one of my favorite quotes because it gives us some responsibility in our relationships. And so in order for people to care for us, we have to let them know how to care for us. So sometimes that does take an element of vulnerability and putting ourselves out there. So I know people feel discouraged in this area, but I would just say keep trying. Don't give up. Keep trying. And maybe the relationship isn't going to be a best friend in your neighborhood. Maybe it is someone online that you're DMing with, or, that kind of thing. So let's just take the support we can get. And I would just encourage people to keep trying.
Yeah, and connect where you can, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a new person. It can be like you said, call an old friend, call someone that you haven't talked to in a long time. They're going to probably it might even lift you up, you know, at how excited they are that you called, you know. So
Mhm.
there I love that. I love that you brought that up. And it does. It takes a certain level of vulnerability, which can be kind of scary when you're feeling down and, not sure, but it more times than not is, I think, worth it. That's
Mhm.
been my experience anyway. Thank you for that. So we could probably talk all day, like I know we could. There's so much I want to learn from you, but I hope everyone joining us today will start queuing up their questions. Like if you have questions for Amanda, please start putting them in the chat. But before we get to questions, I would love it if you would just give us some final thoughts on long-term caregiving journey, and that so many of us are walking. We're currently walking, or we will be walking, right? I mean, that's kind of how it works in our world. And maybe some suggestions on ways that we can approach it with more love, care, support for ourselves. I think that that sometimes gets lost in all the to-dos that we have, all of the responsibility, like you mentioned, that we have to handle. But taking care of ourselves is, should be the most important thing in order for us to make it sustainable. So what would you offer to our viewers today?
Yeah, I mean, this is a spoiler alert on my book. So, it's basically the last chapter is what I'm going to give you in a little nutshell, which is basically that we spend so much of our lives caregiving, and it is very complicated. It's both an honor and our biggest responsibility and stressor all at the same time. But underneath all that caretaking, underneath the decision making and the advocacy is you, like a human with interest and joys and pleasures, and somebody that actually can and deserves to have an identity apart from caretaking. And sometimes people get a little ruffled when I say that because caretaking it's a huge responsibility. It's also a huge I don't want to undermine the honor of it, the joy, the identity that we do get from it. That's all real and totally valid. But I would encourage people to like just for a minute consider like what else is there to me, right? Like what else am I passionate about? I'm 42 and just recently in the past few years I've gotten really into horses. Like who would have ever thought, in my 40s that I could say, "Oh, I'm like love horseback riding." Like that's a new thing for me, you know? And it feels like such a cool thing to be able to develop a new hobby. And I think oftentimes, as parents of disabled children that are so all consumed with caretaking, we forget that like we're allowed to have hobbies and passions and joys and interests too. We're not only are we allowed to, we should have these things. And we will see our friends go through go through middle age, go up to their older adulthood, and we deserve to have the experiences that they're having too. And all of this can exist while we're caretaking, I never want caretaking to feel like a burden, but it is a huge responsibility that impacts our life in ways that people without disabled children, their lives aren't impacted in that way. And so I always want to remind people that they're allowed to have an identity. And I think that this having an identity apart from caretaking, having passions, having interests, these are things that they do make us better caretakers, but that can't be why we do it. We should do it because we deserve it, period. Like hard stop, we deserve it. And we're humans, we deserve to have joy, we deserve to have pleasure. So I don't want people to think when they get that diagnosis early on, like we have the power to change this narrative that having a disabled child means that you won't XYZ or you won't get to do this or you won't get to that. But like let's think how we can continue to develop our sense of self and be, vibrant humans with interests and parents of disabled children. Because I really do believe that it all can exist at the same time. So that's my first part is just like, don't lose sight of who you are. Don't lose sight of who you are. And allow yourself to keep hold of that, right? It doesn't mean we're not going to change. We're definitely going to change for this process. But it does mean that like you're allowed to be a person with interests. And so when you keep that in mind and you have like freedom and flexibility to still have interest. And I know people are saying like, well, I don't have time and I don't have finances. All of this stuff plays into it. And I have to acknowledge privilege where privilege exists and that, these are very real barriers to self-care and identity. But I think if we can give ourselves space to even like micro self-care, which is this new idea that I've been thinking about lately, micro self-care, meaning little ways that we can practice self-care throughout our day. Maybe you have a lunch break and you say, "Oh, the sun is shining. I'm going to go for a 20-minute walk today." Um, for me, micro self-care looks like a Diet Coke like every day. It's like my vice, and I'll always drink my Diet Coke no matter what. That's micro self-care for me, right? So we don't have to think a big trip to Mexico. We can think micro self-care too. So I would encourage people to just let themselves reconnect with themselves. And maybe it looks like a Diet Coke every day. Maybe that's where you are. That's okay. But it's a place to start.
Oh, I love that. I just love that. So, we've shared a lot of little things about just being parents in this journey and also about your book. Where would you like to tell everyone where they can get your book or how to connect?
Yep, absolutely. So you can find me on my website if you want. It's amandagriffithatkins.com, all one word. And I also offer parent consultations if anyone's ever interested in scheduling a consultation with me, where we can just really dig into, what you're struggling with, where you feel like you need support. And I always like to preface it, these are not consultations for how to parent your child. They're consultations for how to care for yourself. Are you struggling in your marriage? Are there really specific things that you are struggling with that you need outside support on? So you can schedule those on my website. And the easiest place to find me really is Instagram. And that's Amanda period Griffith period Atkins. So I'd love to, you can pop over there and say hi to me or pop over to my website. And then the book, you can find it really anywhere, Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million. and or your local bookstore. You can find it there. And I also did the audio recording too. So I talk much slower than I'm talking now on the audio recording. So don't worry.
Oh, that's good to know. I
Yes.
didn't realize that. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing
So you
that.
can find
And
that on Audible or wherever.
awesome. Yeah. And so and we will share all of that, the links and all of the information that Amanda just shared. We'll send that out in a follow-up email. So before we get to Q&A, let's go ahead and let me tell you a little bit about the classes and things that we offer through the Arc of California's Caring Future program. So the future is now. Designing a support plan for you and your adult family member is a 6-week live online class series where caregivers develop a comprehensive future planning guide for the caregiver and their adult family member with a disability, all in a small and welcoming environment. We are excited to announce that we just launched our new self-paced online classes as well. Self-Care Matters, Well-Being for the Caregiver is a 2-week live online class series where caregivers learn about and practice tips, resources, and strategies to improve and sustain their well-being. Future is Now and Self-Care Matters classes are also offered in Spanish. Visit the Caring Futures website at caringfutures.org and join our mailing list to keep up to date with these offerings and to register for classes and more. Also, if you want to continue this conversation, then I invite you to join the
Uh-oh.
Caring Futures Facebook group. It's a private group online for family caregivers and is a safe space for us to share our triumphs and challenges. A link to the Facebook group will be posted in the chat now. So again, thank you for staying for questions, Amanda. We're going to go ahead and begin our Q&A session. So please type your question in the Q&A feature and we will answer you directly or call your question to the attention of the group and Amanda can answer. And if you need ASL interpretation to ask your question, please raise your hand and request video access. So let's get started. We've got about 10 questions, it looks like, in here. And let's go ahead and I'll just start at the top.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, Richard asks, is it hard for parents, especially with adult child? It is hard, he says. Is it okay to fail in trying what adult child wants to do, including supporting living in the community?
I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but I feel that it's always, is it okay? Is it, oh, it is. Oh, it sounds like this is a comment. It is okay to fail, he says.
Oh,
It
okay.
it is okay to fail in trying what adult child wants to do, including support. Absolutely. I agree. Thank you, Richard. I think that's a
Thank
good
you,
point.
Amanda.
Okay. No,
I
don't
got
worry.
so hung up on questions that I read it as a question.
Right. No, that's okay.
But yes, thank you, Richard. That affirmation is true, and it gets back to what Amanda was saying in our conversation that we have to take risks and we have to take chances and be
Yeah.
flexible with the result, right?
Right.
And we can always try again. Okay, so next we have how can we afford to support our kids financially if they can't work full time?
Right. I don't have the answer to this one, but you know who does is, oh shoot, I can't find the book here. It's a book by, let me drop it in the comments. She will have more. There I have a couple resources around financial stuff that somebody can help you with it. I'm feelings, not money, okay? So my husband's an accountant. I'm all feelings, okay? I can't discuss the money questions. I'm the wrong
But it
person.
is a good question.
Great question.
Yeah. So does your book address the transition from child to adult and parent caregiver challenges in overcoming the HIPAA, medical privacy laws, and obtaining conservatorship so we maintain these rights?
Yeah, again, this is like I don't have the answer to that in the book, but that's where like I would connect with a like wouldn't you say like either like a lawyer or a, I mean, who would you recommend that people connect with for this? Because this is a great question.
Yeah, I think so. Probably a lawyer or they're overcoming HIPAA and medical privacy laws. Yeah, you'd probably want to look into an advance directive, power
Yes.
of attorney, conservatorship, those
Yep.
types of things. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. My book, just to give perspective, would more speaks to not the how-to of that, more the emotional experience of the parent. So when I think of a question like this, I'm thinking like, first of all, you're feeling so frustrated with the system. It's so frustrating that we have to prove that our children are incompetent so that we can parent them. That's so messed up, right? Like we can acknowledge that. And the emotional experience of going through having to explain, go in front of a court or whatever the situation is to basically file paperwork to get guardianship. Like as a parent, we have an emotional response to that. There's all the how to, and that stuff's very real and very important. But my book focuses on like, how do you feel when you're doing this? How do we get through this without losing our minds and without, falling into a depression? Like, how do we keep fighting this? How do we keep doing this? So.
Thank you. Um, Leslie asks, as a parent of a young adult that just aged out of the school system, I have found a lot of guilt that even though we tried to prepare ahead of time for years, the transition plan hasn't come to fruition. Oh gosh, I know this. Hasn't come to fruition, and everything moves forward at a snail's pace, despite my sense of urgency that things are set in place. Now that I see everyone else's children graduating from college and starting their own lives without parents, suggestions for dealing with this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the first piece I would say is just give yourself some self-compassion because we all think, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I think, okay, I have a plan, I'm prepared. I, met with a lawyer and I have all this stuff written out. I met with so and so, but we know the system does not work that way. Very rarely do things actually go to our perfect plan. People are don't respond to emails. Things get lost, the system's slow. It's very discouraging to live it out when you feel like you've planned for this exact moment. And so the first thing I would say is give yourself some self-compassion and say, like, you did what you needed to do, sounds like. You did the work, and now here we are, and it's not going exactly as planned. And so that guilt, I wish I could just like wave a magic wand and erase it because my guess is that truly did the things that you thought you needed to do. And here we are in real time and it's not working out. And then I think that piece about you're seeing everyone else's children graduating from college and starting their own lives, like that speaks to grief, right? That speaks to just again that twinge that comes and goes when we see other people's children or other people living this experience where ours looks nothing like. So I would say offer yourself a lot of self-compassion and give yourself space and time to like acknowledge what you're feeling as grief, maybe anger, jealousy. No feelings are off limits, and there's no such thing as a bad feeling. So just give yourself permission to say, like, oh, I'm having a really jealous day. I'm feeling really jealous of my friend whose child just graduated from college. Like, you can have that feeling, and it doesn't make you a bad person. You can have that feeling, and you can still be a great friend. So give yourself permission to feel all of that.
Thank you for sharing that, Leslie. And I just wanted to ask a question too. So does it sort of in giving yourself that acknowledgement and actually identifying what you're feeling and kind of whether you say it out loud or you just acknowledge it in your mind, does it sort of it seems like it would sort of free it up to make it easier to let it go, right? Like now that you've named it and sort of said,
Yep.
this is how I'm feeling. And you know what? I don't like this feeling. So now I'm going to feel it and I'm going to move through it and I'm going to get rid of it and put it over here. And, it might creep up again, but
Mhm.
next time you'll know better what to do with it too, right?
Exactly. That's perfectly said. There's a saying, name it to tame it. And that means like I'm just gonna say the feeling and just get it out of my head. And very crazily, somehow that takes the power away. Somehow just saying like, I feel so jealous that that kid is getting married and she gets to go to her kid's wedding. I can say it to my husband, I can say it to myself, I can write it in a journal, like whatever I need to do. But just saying it sometimes is like, oh yeah, that's the feeling. I'm not very proud of that feeling, but it is what it is. It's just a feeling, and now I can acknowledge it. And then maybe I can even take another step to offer myself some self-care, you know? What do I need to do when I'm having a down day? What are those little things that bring me joy? What are the things that I can do to take care of myself? Because now I know I'm having a down day about this.
Yeah, and it is a struggle when you've done all the right things and we are kind of, we're at the mercy of this system that just doesn't always work for us. And we already, it would be unnatural almost to not acknowledge the hardship that we already feel that we're going through and then to have all that work and still not get what you need, right? So very, very real. Amy says, what is the definition of resilience to you? I'm over the white knuckle phase, but the shoes and some bricks seem to always be dropping. I am one of five, four with disabilities, ages 9, 11, 19, 22. We are all in the phases of transition, and I work at the disability caregiver spaces. So I also have that pressure.
Wow. First of all, resilience. I mean, Amy, it sounds like you are the definition of resilience. It might not feel that way today, but 9, 11, 19, and 22. I mean, I'm so struck by those ages because 9 is still really quite young. And so to have, it's like you have your 9 and your 11-year-old and your 19 and your 22-year-old. So those are two very different stages of life. You are over the white knuckle phase, but yeah, but right, I totally hear what you're saying, but there's still got to be lots of bumps in the road. Because you have some kids that are in the school system. Yeah, your older, your 22-year-old probably is just about out of the school system, if not out. So yeah, I think like what is resilience? I mean, to me, resilience can look in a million different ways on any given day. Sometimes the depth of my resilience is simply getting out of bed and doing my to-do list. Truly. And some days when my head hits a pillow, I'm like, ah, I was pretty resilient today. I did it. I didn't scream at anyone. I showed up for work. I did what I needed to do. Some days my resilience looks like getting on a webinar and speaking to, 60 people. Not every day, so I think, again, to go back to the idea of self-compassion, your resilience is going to look different based on what is going on with your kids, based on did you get enough sleep, based on how are your other relationships in your life. And so we're not hitting a home run every day, and that's okay. Some days we're like just getting a walk and walking onto first base. You're still on base. Some days we're striking out. That's okay too, So resilience is getting up in the morning,
Yeah, I love that. I love the baseball references too.
right?
So Carrie says we are finding the inconsistent support, the caregiver crisis. Oh, boy, do I hear that. My husband and I aren't seeing a future of travel, freedom as we are getting close to retirement. How do we shift our own dreams, visions for the future? Such a good question. Hard one to answer, but because it's so individualized. But what would you say to that? What are some first steps to try to shift that?
What comes to mind when I read this is that many of us have been shifting our dreams and our visions for the future since the day we got our child's diagnosis. So this is not a new experience for you, Carrie. This is something, it's just in a different light now. It's like you thought that you would reach this point of retirement and life would look a certain way. And as it turns out, it's not. And my guess is that this is an old familiar feeling to you. I don't say that saying that our children are a disappointment or that, again, that I don't want to paint it in an entirely negative light, but the reality is life looks different from the way you thought it would look. And so go back to that idea of micro self-care. I'm not even going to pretend to say that drinking a Diet Coke is as good as traveling to, Australia or whatever, because it's simply not. But I think this is a time where you can get back to your passions and think like, well, how can I find joy within my circumstances? And knowing that joy and grief, we hold them at the same time. It's not like, okay, I have this little piece of joy, so now that erases all the grief. No, there's tons of grief. I would much rather be in Australia right now, right, than sitting here drinking this Diet Coke. I don't know why I'm using my Diet Coke analogy so much. But get tr find the little joys in life and grieve these big things that you've missed out on, that you're going to miss out on. And I would also say don't give up on the dreams of travel. Like, you Is there a way that you can grow your community? Is there respite care? And I know all of these things feel so inaccessible, but is there a family friend? Like you, I know that you've exhausted these questions. You say, yes, yes, I've asked myself, but I would just say don't give up on it and pursue joy and your passions where you can, because your life isn't over.
Yeah, and get back to those reflections and
Yeah,
ask those questions, right? Like ask the questions of, so how could we take a trip for ourselves this
that's
year?
right.
What would we need to do that?
That's right.
Who would we need to support us? And what would that look like? And then once you can sort of map it out, then you can start to plug in the pieces, right? And then who knows, maybe you actually can take a trip.
That's right. Maybe you have three friends that are all going to take 2 nights each, and you nail this plan and it's super stressful, but you're like, you know what? I know it's going to be crazy. I know my child's going to melt down, but my friends can handle it and I'm doing it. Like that's
Yeah.
okay. It doesn't have to be perfect.
So we have a question from Sharon who asks about if you accept different types of insurance. So it looks like she's asking about Cigna PPO.
I do not accept Cigna PPO. And in fact, the parent consultations are not covered by insurance because most of them are out of state. I do have therapy resources for people in Illinois. That's where I'm located in Chicago. Because I own a therapy practice here with about 28 therapists. And so if anybody's in Illinois, which I doubt anybody is, also I love to connect people with therapists. So I have on my website a directory of
Oh,
therapists
great.
in your state that work with parents of disabled children. That's a mouthful. So, and we do have a pretty significant California resource list there. So you can log onto my website and see the California providers that are experienced in working with parents of disabled children.
Excellent. Oh, I love that. Thank you. I didn't realize that either.
Yeah.
Um, Blanca asks, how can we frame our caregiving as an important, dignified, and professional to others who don't understand all the work we do? Caregiving for special needs children requires many professional skills, coordinating many appointments with various agencies, record keeping, organizing, advocating, etc. Oh, yes, Blanca, I agree with you 100%.
I mean, yes, like it's unbelievable what we do in a day, plus those of us that do have an outside full-time job or whatever, anything. And oh my gosh, how do we explain this to other people? I don't have them come spend 24 hours with you. Like, how it is. I love this question because I love it that you use the word dignified. Like you're right. This is a real, like it is a freaking like well-oiled machine what we do in a day. I mean, the nuance of reading our child's mood and knowing what providers are going to tick off what and trying to stay 3 steps ahead of everything to try and just make sure the day, then you're talking about food choices and what they'll eat and what they won't eat and I mean, it's unbelievable the mental load that we carry. I would argue validate it for yourself, let your loved ones validate it. If you feel like there's people in your life who don't validate it, like shame on them. Tell them to come over and spend the afternoon with you, honestly, and they can see it for themselves.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, it is. It's not just about the hard work. It's about the experience and the education that we have without even looking for it gained, right? Like we as parents have really taken on all these different roles,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
people, are professionals and we are now those professionals. Thank you for that question. So
Mhm.
you spoke to how your children's future will be different than what we imagined. How do I explain this to my child? Oh, this is a great question. That he won't be able to go to college, that he can't drive a car, etc.
I love this question so much. And I think, first of all, in the same way that we're acknowledging our grief, we have to acknowledge our children's grief, right? This is all parallel process. So say your son comes to you, your child comes to you. Actually, I'll use my example. Asher, my son's 16. He said, oh, my friend Elle got her driver's license. When am I going to get my driver's license? Asher's cognitively impaired. He has impulse control. There's no way he could get a driver's license. And so I said, this really sucks, but I think because of your disability, because of Prader-Willi syndrome, I don't know that you're going to be able to get a driver's license. What do you think about that? Are you mad about that? Doesn't that I that feels really unfair. I wish that you could get your driver's license. I don't have the perfect answer, but I feel sad about this too. And you know what? I promise that I will do my best to drive you everywhere you want to go. And if you feel mad about that sometimes, I understand. I feel mad about it too. We can't stop our kids from feeling grief in the same way we can't stop ourselves from feeling grief. It's not your job to eliminate the grief. It's your job to simply be a container for it. So when you say, yeah, it doesn't look like you're going to be able to go to college, like let's talk about that. What do you feel? What could we do instead of college? What feels important to you? Why are you sad about not going to college? So we can't make our kids not feel certain feelings. All we can do is just respond with compassion and give them space to feel what they're feeling, which is exactly what we're doing for ourselves, right?
Yeah, so in a sense, you're sort of modeling that by engaging with them and actually giving them an opportunity to identify their own feelings,
Yes.
which sheltering them from those feelings is not going to be good for either of you.
No,
So,
because they're feeling it no matter what.
yeah.
Again, in the same way we're feeling it no matter what, right? So let's just make space for it. It's not a bad thing,
Yeah, no, gosh, please, let's all do that more often.
right?
Feelings are not bad things. So
Yeah.
Robin says, cheers to Amanda. Cheers, Amanda, to Diet Coke. It's my self-care as well. Okay, good. So we've got some Diet Coke buddies here. I would like advice on how to really find yourself again. This is a serious issue for me. When asked what I like to do, it feels like the old Robin would have a ton of things to say. The Robin here today, who has caregived for my son for 19 years, the one who has been his voice and his everything, doesn't really know what to say. It's like I have completely lost myself and I know I deserve a life of my own. Any advice?
This is a beautiful question. This is like the dream question for me, because this is literally why I wrote my book. So please, this isn't me just giving a pitch for my book. Please buy it or get it from your library or whatever you want to do. I don't care, but read the book because this is my passion in life is like helping us find ourselves. And you sound like an incredible mom. You've you've been his voice, your life has become caretaking for him, which sounds like it's what needed to happen, but you're at a point now where you're like, I want to find myself in there. And so I would say, simple question that I ask, the very short, quick question is, what brings you joy? And if you're like many of the clients I work with, you're probably sitting there going, wait, what brings me joy? I don't know what brings me joy, right? So spend some time thinking what brings you joy. You can start with the littlest thing. Like right now, my window's open, I can see the leaves blowing, and I can hear birds chirping. That brings me a little bit of joy. That says, hey, maybe later today I should go outside for a walk. It's gorgeous outside. That would be a really nice self-care thing. So, what brings you joy? And then please, if you get a chance, read my book because honestly, there's lots of exercises that talk you exactly right through this. So, great question.
Thank you, Robin. Okay, we are getting close. We've got 6 minutes and we've got 7 questions. So let's see how we do. So Amanda asks, can you talk more about first steps for parent caregivers who are experiencing burnout and feel that they have lost themselves as individuals? I'm a direct support worker for many families in this position.
Yes, this is a great question. I have another book recommendation for this that I can't find at the moment, but it's called Burnout is the title of the book. And it's by Emily Nagoski and her sister, also, I can't remember the sister's first name, but also Nagoski. Burnout is the name of the book. Please read it. It talks about completing the stress cycle, which is something that I could talk about for hours. And I think the sort of like remedy for caregiver burnout is self-care, which is an annoying answer because it feels like we're inundated with theories about self-care, but I mean real self-care. I always joke that for me, self-care is going to the dentist because I hate doing it and it's something that I have to do and it's important for my well-being. So, thinking I love all of the information in the book Burnout, and then also really trying to connect to yourself again, find a sense of joy, and in any way, shape, or form, claim some sense of time for yourself. Whether it's like, that's the hardest part of all of this, right? Is that we feel like we don't have support, we feel like we don't have extra caretakers for our children, and so we're spending so much time caregiving, but also it's okay for you to put your child on an iPad so that you can walk on a walking pad, or so that you can read a book, or so that you can sit in the basement and eat ice cream. Like, let's do what we need to do to make sure we're being taken care of too.
Excellent. So Elizabeth asks, as a parent of a child identified with developmental disabilities at 19 years old after aging out of school, where do you go to find the list of all the things that should happen? Our family is floundering trying to find a path forward.
So I think she means what should happen, meaning like what the series of events should be at this point. Is that right, do you think?
Yeah, I think she's
Late
getting a late
diagnosis.
start and yeah, late
I
diagnosis.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to this. I don't know. Do
I
you?
think it will depend on what state you're in. Um,
Yeah.
and if you're in California, it's the regional center would be the place to go. Now, usually that diagnosis and that service begins before the age of 18, but it's not impossible to get regional center services after the age of 18. So, if you want to reach out, and give us some more specifics about your situation, we could maybe help you with that. Um, yeah, let's go to the next question. Is it bad to just close yourself off from having feelings about what typical adults are doing in comparison to my disabled adult son?
Well, you're asking a therapist if it's bad to close yourself off from feelings. So
You're going to tell them the answer, aren't you?
I gotta tell you, yeah, we gotta feel our feelings. We gotta feel our feelings. You have to feel your feelings. How do you close yourself off? Can you really ever close yourself off from feelings? That's my question back to you. Or
Yeah.
are those feelings just gonna sit and fester and make you feel so angry?
Yeah. Better to feel them and move through them, right?
Yes.
So, we have another question. Sorry, I jumped on a little late, but I just wanted to thank you for this conversation. It has been a long journey of grief, and just listening to this conversation makes me feel so grateful. I have a lot of work to do, but knowing that there's hope. Oh, that made
Oh,
me tear up. Thank
love
you for
that.
that comment. Janet says, caregiver burnout is so hard to get out of, so this is so helpful. Thank you. And then we have one last question, and then we are going
Okay.
to wrap it up. So, how do I support my daughter and her son, who is the disabled one, now 21? My feelings are couched in theirs. But with my added frustrations of no real power and the added grief of my daughter's challenges, I don't quite know what I'm asking. I'm both deeply involved and also sidelined at the end of the day.
Well, we love a supportive grandma. We love, love, love a supportive grandma. And that's what you sound like to me. So I would say, I would say, tell your daughter how you feel. Say, I want to, I wish I could support you more. I just have so many feelings about this. Like, what do you need from me? What do you need? How can I be the best support to you? What do you need? And just show up and truly ask what she needs and try and meet those needs. That's what I would say. And allow yourself to completely have your own emotions too, because I think grandparents are in a really unique position of watching their children struggle and not being able to help. That's exactly how you said you feel. And I've heard that from so many grandparents. So simultaneously give yourself permission to grieve all these things, and grieving watching your child struggle and watching your grandchild struggle, and also step in and be supportive where you can. I mean, what a great grandma. I love it. I love this.
Yeah, I do too. That's another one that got me a little
Yes,
teary.
right?
Thank you all for your participation with wonderful questions. And Amanda, thank you again for being here
Thank
with us
you.
today. That seems like a really good place to wrap up for today. So have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.